Excellent, thank you very much. Okay, so without further ado, let's dive right in and start talking about SCOM versus Azure Monitor. So the objective of me being here today is to try and provide some insight into when to use Azure Monitor, when to use SCOM in relation to monitoring for your cloud, your on-premise, and your hybrid scenarios. So just up front, this is quite a complex topic, and I'm going to do my best to unpack this as best I can. So on the journey to cloud, from on-premise to cloud, most organizations will find themselves in a state of flux between these two endpoints, and most will end up in a hybrid scenario. Now, with the constantly changing IT landscape, it's very common to question which monitoring tool to be using. Especially in today's times, it is more critical than ever to have an effective monitoring strategy to be able to manage the health of our environments. So here are a few of the questions that I'm commonly asked. So I'll do my best to try and shed some light on these. I think the is SCOM dead has been done to death, but it is something that still get asked on a regular basis. Should I be investing in SCOM? Is Azure Monitor going to replace SCOM? I think that's quite a common one, and that's been around even since the OMS days. When should I be switching? And what is the difference between the two tools? So let's start by looking at SCOM. So there's been a period of uncertainty with SCOM. There was a while where there was a lot of chatter in the community. Was it going to be developed further? Would another tool be replacing it? So the good news is SCOM is not going anywhere. So the current iteration, 2019, has a commitment of 10 years of support from Microsoft with an update rollup released every 6 months, which includes not only bug fixes and improvements, but also new features, which is great in and of itself. Having a look at the roadmap, we currently find ourselves here with 2019. So we know it's got life in it until 2029 with updates on a 6-month cadence. And in the future, there are a couple of exciting things. Unfortunately, I can't give out any details around these just yet as they're still in early development. I saw some questions earlier in the day, actually from a blog article that I wrote, which I thought was pretty cool, around Aquila, which is the SCOM managed instance. So that is going to be hosted as an Azure service, and that's essentially Cloud SCOM, which is pretty cool, and it's an exciting thing. So all I can tell you right now is that the private preview is expected around June. So for those of you on the private preview track, keep an eye out for that. And there is also a vNext for SCOM currently being developed. So I can tell you, if you do have an idea for a way to improve the product, so now is the perfect time to head over to either the SCOM user voice to have your say, or you can email systemcenterfeedback@microsoft.com, because the product group is very interested in ways that SCOM can be enhanced, and there's a lot of development work that's being put in here. So what are the benefits? So we know SCOM is a very powerful tool with a huge host of really cool features, not the least of which we know it's easy to configure and get started with. So you have your management packs giving you essentially a quick start for your monitoring, doing all of your heavy lifting. And there is a very short implementation period from when you first deploy the tool to getting valuable monitoring data essentially out of the box. It's very customizable. There's this deep level ability to create custom monitoring for essentially anything. I'd like to think we've all seen the coffee pot management pack because it's one of those cool things that have been running around the SCOM world for a while. And I've also seen some really cool proof of concepts around weather reporting through SCOM as well. In this case, the sky literally is the limit for what you can do with SCOM in terms of customizations. We have obviously the native reporting capabilities of SCOM and the ability to customize those as well. They're easy to schedule. You get them with your management packs, so that gives you really rich reports with essentially a minimum of effort, and also out of the box for the various management packs. And then we have quite a deep level of alert granularity as well. Also easy to configure. There's a common theme here. Simple to get your alerts up and running, be very granular about who gets what time of day, using various channels. And just while I'm talking about SCOM as well, so there is a nice thing where there's the shared system center license. So what's pretty cool here is if you're using a different system center product, so for example, if you're using Configman to do your patching, but you're not using SCOM for your monitoring, the license is shared, so there's no additional cost in terms of the licensing to implement SCOM into an organization like that. Of course, the SCOM, there's also a long pedigree of monitoring with a big community full of really cool people and good ideas and lots of cool custom management packs. So there's a long history of awesome work that's being done on the community as well. So odds are, if it's not something that's available out of the box to SCOM, someone else has already thought of that idea and already started implementing that as well. Now let's take a look at the other side and dive into Azure Monitor. So what can you do with Azure Monitor? So of course, we can detect and diagnose issues across apps and their dependencies with application insights. If we look at the screenshot on the right-hand side here, I can see that I have a 3-tier application and that it's very easy to immediately tell that I'm having issues with the front end and the middle tier, which is my payment worker. This is the application map, which is a machine learning built view of my application using the telemetry that is collected through App Insights. And there's a very simple process to be able to investigate further with one click as to what's causing that issue. And then from there, I can give the information through to the correct team or my developer, and I can go and get that sorted out quite quickly and easily. We can correlate issues at the infra level with insights, and there's a lot of these that are already available in Azure Monitor today, such as for VMs, you've got AKS, SQL, your networks, you've got containers and key vaults, storage, and there's more of these being added all the time. Really, really awesome, powerful stuff. We can, of course, operationalize at scale with smart alerts and automated actions. So we've got our action groups here where we can make use of integration to various notification methods such as text message or ITSM tools. And then you can obviously do automated responses on these as well. Moving over to the log analytics side, so we can drill down in that for very deep level troubleshooting and diagnostics. So now this does require some understanding of the Custo query language, also known as KQL. The good news is it's not the most difficult language to learn. I think the way I kind of got started with it is the same way I got started with PowerShell, in that you kind of work with other people's scripts until you can understand enough about what they're doing to go ahead and write your own, and you kind of develop from there. And there's already quite a huge repository of Custo examples available on the internet today, which are a fantastic starting point for anyone looking to get started to learn the language. And there's also some great examples in the official Microsoft documentation as well, across a wide variety of scenarios. And what would any monitoring tool be like without visualization? So we have the Azure dashboards and workbooks. The picture on the right-hand side showing mixed data from a variety of sections of the Azure portal. So I'm not sure if everyone's aware, but you can actually pin any visualization data in the Azure portal to a dashboard and create these really powerful mixed data views. So this is an application, and I can see the application view on the right, on the left-hand side of my picture here. So I've got things like failed requests. I have an application map, which comes from Application Insights, which we just looked at earlier. And on the right-hand side, I have things like my security data, and then I've got my infrastructure, I've got compute and availability tests and all this really cool stuff, all in a single view. And it's really powerful to be able to create a view that has meaning to the person that's going to be viewing it. Of course, we also have the workbooks, which is a relatively recent addition to Azure Monitor. It's a fantastic way to visualize data, which is very interactive. If you haven't looked at it yet, it's really cool. And then Azure Monitor, being a cloud-first monitoring tool, is designed to manage and monitor a wide range of your cloud components and services, leveraging not only the real-time capabilities of Azure Metrics, but also the power of your log analytics, both of which feed into a wide variety of insights, visuals, and analysis tools, which we've seen some examples of here now. So how does Azure Monitor work? So it all starts with collecting your telemetry. So Azure Monitor can collect data from applications, networks, infrastructure, and of course you can ingest your own custom data. All of this data is stored in centralized, fully managed logs and metric stores. Now, what can you do with that data? So typically, where most people start is with Insights, which is an end-to-end experience which has been put together for canonical scenarios or resources such as applications and containers, VMs, network storage, and the like. Now, Insights provide you guidance and help troubleshoot and root cause issues quickly with a drill down experience. The latest one, I think that's just come out, is Windows Virtual Desktop. And if you're looking for an example of a workbook that uses all of the cool features that you can do with workbooks, that WVD one is the one to look at. It has absolutely all the bells and whistles that you might want to see in action. Now, you may, in certain cases, want to just visualize your data. So, of course, we have the Azure dashboards. There is also a Power BI integration. And then there's a more native experience, which is the workbooks, which I've just mentioned now. After visualizing the data, you may form a hypothesis and you want to test it out. So for that, you need access to the raw data store. And in order to do that, you've got the metrics explorer. So that'll let you view the metrics data raw as collected. And then there is a powerful big data platform, which we know as Log Analytics, which is capable of querying even petabytes of data within seconds. So that's really powerful stuff. If you want to be proactive and you want to take corrective actions, you can create your alerts and your runbooks to automatically remediate an issue. Or if it's something like a capacity issue, you can use scale in or scale out. You really utilize the power of cloud to automatically solve things like performance and capacity problems. And finally, we know that monitoring isn't done in silos. So Azure Monitor provides an out-of-the-box integration with popular ITSM and DevOps tools. And you can, again, also use APIs and Event Hub and Logic apps to build custom integrations. Having a look at the roadmap for Azure Monitor for 2021. So obviously some of these things are already available today. So the new Azure Monitor agent has been released in GA, I think 2 months ago. And that already has support for Arc and your VMs and container insights and your SQL insights. There is a new enhanced URL ping test, which gives you a more advanced way of testing your HTTP verb and HTTP certificate lifetime and quality checks and things like that. And then there is a broader automatic instrumentation and open telemetry support as well. You now have the ability to instrument traces from languages such as Go, Erlang, and Rust. And you can correlate those traces across service boundaries and even external customers. So it enables you to have a multi-cloud customer that can do vendor agnostic instrumentation separate from instrumentation of code. For example, the Java 3 agent is based on open telemetry instrumentation. So you can use that in a vendor agnostic scenario. Right, so a lot of cool stuff happening there. As with anything in Azure, it's changing constantly. It's good to always keep an eye out for what's going on in the Azure world, because it is changing rapidly, and you blink and then you miss the next thing, and it's just one of those situations where you really have to keep up with what's going on. Right, so let's look how monitoring is changing. So traditionally, you had specialized roles and you would have specialized monitoring tools for those roles. So you would have your application developers using an application performance management system to look at your app runtime issues. You would have your IT operations teams using infrastructure monitoring tools to take care of your infrastructure issues. And then you would have your network admins using packet captures and other network monitoring tools to manage your network. Now, with the introduction of a DevOps and SRE culture, the responsibilities are changing. Also, with the new paradigms such as microservices and containers, the traditional division of infra, app, and network is breaking down. With Azure Monitor, the goal is to help accelerate this transformation to a DevOps and SRE culture by giving a full stack monitoring solution that will give you visibility across your app, infra, and network, and works equally well with new and legacy technologies and applications. I think we've all been in that situation where you're sitting around a room and the application guy is pointing fingers at the network guy, and the network guy is pointing fingers at the storage guy, and so on and so on. We go around in circles and nothing actually gets done because we're having a big argument. This model gives a much more complete picture, making it easier to pinpoint the true cause of an issue. And you really get to a situation where everyone works together as opposed to against each other. Right, so going back to where we started, SCOM versus Azure Monitor, let's flip the script a little bit and talk about SCOM with Azure Monitor. So clearly each of these tools have a certain level of overlap, but they also come to play with their own strengths. So how and when can we leverage these? So the thing to consider here is that particularly in your on-prem and IaaS space, we have quite an area of similarity between SCOM and Azure Monitor. So VMs in the cloud act as any other VM would and still benefit from SCOM strength, We mentioned some of them before. It's easy to configure. You get to leverage your current skills and your monitoring customizations and pedigree, and so on. Now, while Azure Monitor can also be used to monitor your on-prem devices, either directly connected or through something like Azure Arc, it does have a higher barrier to entry. So there's a great deal of configuration that is required to take place. However, it also brings powerful analytics tools to the table. So if we look at something like Sentinel, which is built on log analytics and is essentially Azure Monitor, it offers a whole new level of insight into security events. So that's just an example of some of the power that can be brought to bear through log analytics and Azure Monitor. Now, once we start moving out of the IaaS space and we move towards your cloud services, this is where you need to turn to a cloud-focused tool and where Azure Monitor really starts to shine. So if we're talking about things like containers, key vaults, cognitive services, web application firewalls, and the like, then SCOM has limited to no visibility on these services due to how it's been designed as a data center tool. And this is where Azure Monitor comes to play with full insights and analytics. Now, most organizations are somewhere in between these points. And in order to monitor effectively, you have to have the complete picture. And in an ideal world, this would also be in a single place. So the perfect situation is to be able to assess the business needs of an organization when it comes to monitoring and fit the best tool for each scenario and integrate them together. So now let's talk about using Azure Monitor and SCOM together. Let's really dive in here. So Azure Monitor gives you your full stack observability for cloud native and on-prem resources with rich analytics and alerting. Now we can complement that with SCOM. So SCOM, we have our management packs, which give our detailed workload monitoring, and we can track detailed and custom health of monitored resources with the health model, which SCOM does really, really well. We can retain data on-premise or within an isolated network using the SCOM databases. And it's quite simple to get started to integrate SCOM to Azure Monitor. There's a lovely vanity link here, aka.ms/Azure Monitor SCOM. And there's lovely instructions, quite easy to follow, to integrate your SCOM environment and Azure Monitor, just to plug them in together, which is the starting point of the integration. And let's just have a look at the comparable capabilities across the different pillars of the monitoring that we're chatting about today. So first up, we want to be able to visualize our data. Azure Monitor, we've looked at some of the visuals that we can have in a little bit earlier today. So we have our workbooks and our dashboards. We have our resource overviews, of course. SCOM coming with its views, especially with the new HTML5 dashboard experience, is a much richer view experience and much more customizable than we've had in the past. If we look at how do we, obviously, any monitoring tool, you're going to want to be able to respond to the incidents that you are picking up in your environment. Both systems obviously have alerts, and you can combine these together in a single view. We'll look at that in a moment. We obviously want to be able to assess what's going on. So we have the insights from Azure Monitor, SCOM coming with a lot of powerful pre-configured monitoring for your SCOM side. And then in order to analyze your data, we have the Log Analytics and Metrics Explorer to be able to get that deep level diagnosis and troubleshooting on the Azure Monitor side. And then the SCOM Data Warehouse, obviously a massive wealth of data that can be really delved into to get a lot of information around your environment. And then with application monitoring, application insights, which we saw a little bit of earlier, and then application performance monitoring on the SCOM side. Something you definitely going to want to think about when it comes to this scenario is your monitoring strategy for hybrid cloud monitoring. Here's another vanity link here, aka.ms/hybrid cloud monitoring. It's very important when you start thinking about when and where to use all these tools that you plan what your actual scenarios are. So for example, if it's important in your organization to be able to monitor the health of a Windows service, SCOM can do that easily. Azure Monitor can also do that, but it's a bit more complicated, and the results that you get are a little bit different. And this is the time when you would actually sit and plan out, not necessarily just what your environment looks like, but what are the actual monitoring scenarios that you want to look into. in order to pick the tool that makes the most sense. Now, we actually like to talk about a better together solution. So when we talk about System Center and Azure, they work really well in their own in their own ways. But once you start combining them together, you start to see real power. So in this model, your central IT can continue to use System Center, and then you can enable teams to use the Azure services to manage their own servers that are in the cloud, and then make use of the Azure Monitor services there as well. So just to give an example there, so in the monitoring world, essentially your central RT would monitor systems using SCOM, and then you can have teams that monitor the infrastructure and applications using Azure Monitor, because you can be very granular as well about who has access to what in terms of the Azure Monitor world as well. Right, so there are a couple of different ways you can integrate these two powerhouses together. There is a management pack for Azure, which you would deploy as you would any other management pack for SCOM. Once you've imported it, it will then allow you to connect it to an Azure subscription. And this is really great when you're getting started, especially on the cloud journey. So you can integrate your Azure to SCOM, and then as you start building stuff in Azure, it actually lets you pull down those health states into SCOM, and then you can interact with them as you would any other SCOM object. So you can create alerts for them, you can put them into views, which you can customize, and you can report on them as well. So you can start looking at things like using SCOM availability reports for your Azure services, if you want to do it that way. There's also an alerts management solution, which lets you take your SCOM alerts and bring them up into Azure Monitor. Now this lets you use the power of action groups and all the other cool Azure Monitor features that are related to alerting. So you can do ITSM integration, you can connect them to logic apps for automation, and so on. So I'd just like to leave you with a final thought today. So today, more than ever before, due to the remote situation that many of us find ourselves in, regardless of the tools that you use, it is critical to have a complete picture of your environment. So whichever monitoring tool you end up using, you really want to make sure that it's giving you that comprehensive and full picture. And this is why you want to at least consider using SCOM and Azure Monitor together to get that complete view of your hybrid environment. So I'd like to just thank you all very much for spending time with me here today, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that anyone may have.
Yeah, thank you so much, Warren. We do have, there are a bunch of questions that are waiting for you. I have a question maybe to kick off the Q&A part of our session. And the question is really around, you work with a lot of customers and in the context of monitoring and managing their IT infrastructures. And have you worked with customers who have perhaps, maybe stripped out their SCOM environment and moved to Azure Monitor in a, completely or in a really meaningful way? And what's been that experience of the customers?
So typically customers that have looked at removing SCOM altogether have mostly lifted and shifted their entire IT infrastructure onto the cloud, and they've been able to spend sort of that learning and that effort into being able to configure it in a way that makes sense to them. So something to bear in mind with Azure Monitor is there's a lot that you need to do upfront to get working with Azure Monitor. But on the flip side of that, you end up only monitoring the things that make specific sense to your scenarios, which I mentioned the scenarios earlier. Whereas there has been this chatter in the past about SCOM being a very noisy tool. The reason that is because you get a management pack which kind of has to best fit most scenarios out the box. So you will get alerts on things that don't make sense for you, which you then go and have to tune. It's almost in response to that Azure Monitor has been designed in a way where you have to specifically configure each and every single thing that you want it to do. But the experience, I think the experience has been pretty good for the customers that I've dealt with that have gone that route. Obviously in those cases they don't have much of an on-prem left behind. So Azure Monitor is fitting their needs. yeah, so hopefully that answers the question.
Sure, yeah, and I guess just maybe one follow-up question to that is if customer, a lot of most customers who are running SCOM to monitor their on-premise environment have made a significant investment in management packs, in either customizing some of the commercially available management packs, perhaps building their own management packs to monitor certain infrastructure or applications. And is there any sort of pathway to retain some of those investments when the scenario you gave of a lift and shift to Azure Monitor? Is there any sort of migration path, or is it really just kind of start over again with the Azure Monitor tool?
Unfortunately, there's no real easy way to do this. However, on the plus side, it's a really good opportunity to review that customization in the management packs that you have and make sure that you actually do need all of those things. There is unfortunately no golden button that you can press that will just convert all your management packs to Azure Monitor. I think that's something I think it's something we're all hoping for.
Yeah, no, understand that for sure, and yeah, no, it is a great opportunity to review the monitoring that's being done and really optimize the monitoring. And as you say, it's a great opportunity to move to more of a DevOps oriented type of environment. So, okay, well, thanks for that, Warren. There are a few questions. If you do you want to open up the Q&A window and maybe go through those, Warren, or do you want me to read them out to you, or how do you want to do this?
I just need to see where it kind of starts from. I'm happy if you read them out.
Okay, sure. So James asks the question, are SCOM's APM modules going to be updated to come closer in functionality to App Insights, App Dynamics, but for on-prem environment monitoring?
For APM, I actually don't know the answer to this, and I'm quite happy to say I don't know. But this is the perfect opportunity to tell the product group that this is something that you're looking for, because this is all being developed now for the next version of SCOM. So I don't think so right now, but if this is something that becomes popular enough, I don't see why it wouldn't be a thing.
Sure. So James, we'll pose that question to the product team as well, and get a response from them. I think they did reference the user voice tool, and a great place to submit feedback and requirements. So perhaps that's another vehicle to follow, but we will submit that to the SCOM product team. Okay, next question. If I want to monitor cloud resources using SCOM, do I need a separate enterprise license?
I don't believe so, but I do stand to be corrected.
Okay, we can get confirmation on that. Next question, is there a date for when log alerts will be stateful?
I believe log alerts have just, stateful log alerts have just gone into, I want to say, private preview now. There's no date for when that's going to go GA just yet. So, but generally we go from private preview to public to GA quite quickly. So I'd keep an eye on that. It would be hopefully sometime this year.
Okay, the questions are starting to flow in here, so we'll keep rolling. How does the Azure Management Pack fit into this? When should it be used?
Okay, so the Azure Management Pack is what allows you to see your Azure Service Health states in SCOM. So if you want to be able to use SCOM as your single pane of glass, if you will, then you would want to use the Azure Management Pack in that situation to be able to integrate those Azure services as SCOM objects.
How well does Azure monitoring work with Unix, Linux clients? SCOM has challenges with managing these environments reliably.
How well does it work? That's a bit of a loaded question. I can tell you in my experience that Azure Monitor has worked pretty well with the Unix and Linux versions that are supported. I don't think that's a particularly extensive list right now, but on the alternative side of that, I haven't done a massive amount of in-depth monitoring with it. So it's supposed to have been typically like your operating system health, that sort of thing. Okay,
a couple more questions. Perhaps, Mark, this is more of some feedback or observations, but his question is this. My experience with MCS so far is to use Azure Monitor and not SCOM in Azure, even with limitations related to service and process monitoring, lack of a script runtime, management packs, and maintenance mode. So I guess his question is, will Microsoft eventually begin championing SCOM for these scenarios now that it is staying around?
That sounds more like a marketing question. So
Yeah.
there is a lot of buzz in Microsoft land around SCOM, because there are a lot of there's a very big monitoring community in Microsoft, and we believe that both of these tools are very powerful and they have their place. So again, it's going to come down to the scenarios that benefit you. So if the particular monitoring that you are looking for is a strength of SCOM and not Azure Monitor, then there's nothing stopping you from using SCOM in that scenario.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, this is obviously a hot topic, excuse me, Warren, because we're getting lots more questions coming in here. So I hope I can keep you on for a few more minutes. Next question is, the customers who have moved to Azure Monitor completely, how are they monitoring their custom applications in case if they would have custom MPs in SCOM?
Okay, so in the case of custom applications, it does become a lot easier if it's in-house developed, because if you can get to the developer, it makes things a lot more simple. In Visual Studio, there's a little switch that you flip that says enable application insights telemetry, and then that allows you to just plug that straight into application insights. Also, if you are hosting your application on Azure, there's a diagnostic setting that you just enable. It's essentially almost a configuration-free experience to be able to connect a custom application into App Insights.
Okay, how do I get
with the answer to that being App Insights? Sorry,
yeah.
I realized I didn't actually answer the question.
Good one. Okay, how do I get Azure AD Connect Health into Azure Monitor /log analytics?
I just need to think now, because Azure AD is not something I deal with on a regular basis. But if you enable the diagnostics for it, which is the same as any other Azure service that you want to connect to Azure Monitor, there is a set of telemetry that flows in there, and there are actually pre-built workbooks for this as well. I'm not sure if AD Connect is one of those things, but if you go and check under your Azure AD in the portal and then enable diagnostics to go to log analytics, as you would any other Azure service, there are quite a lot of things there around AD and AAD that you can leverage.
And I'll mention as well, our next session, Cameron Fuller is going to be talking to us in some detail about Azure Monitor. So that's a great, these Warren's session and these questions are a great segue into Cameron's section, which is on deck next to talk into some more detail. And we can certainly drill down some of these scenarios that perhaps Cameron can take us through. Next question, would it be possible to monitor a cloud server in SCOM and vice versa? Can Azure monitor on-prem servers?
Okay, 100%. It is possible to monitor a cloud server in SCOM. You do need some sort of connectivity, either via an express route or a VPN or something like that, to be able to essentially extend your network into Azure. But once you have done that, you could monitor a server precisely as you would on your on-premise network. I'd obviously recommend making use of a gateway to reduce the amount of data that you're transferring. And on the other side, so can Azure monitor an on-prem server? So yes, there's two ways to do it. You can either directly connect a server using the Microsoft monitoring agent. You can connect it to a log analytics workspace, or you can enable a server for Azure Arc, which is specifically designed to let you use Azure services on your on-prem. And that's not just for monitoring. You can include things like Azure policies and all the other really cool, powerful things that Azure does, and then make use of those to manage your on-prem servers.
Okay, next question. Do I need separate licensing for Azure? How are the licensing models different? I think you touched on this earlier, but maybe just add some more context to that.
I'm a little unsure as to licensing for Azure, because obviously you do need to have an Azure tenant and subscription, which is part of like how that would all work. And then just to bear in mind, there is a cost associated with Azure Monitor and Log Analytics as well. That is the cost for the data that gets ingested into the system, which is a per gigabyte model. You get 5 gigabytes for free, and then I think it's $1.40 per gigabyte after that, depending on the region that you're in. So it will be slightly different costs. In order to make use of the Azure Management Pack for SCOM, I don't believe there's any licensing additional that you would need.
Okay. And maybe as a somewhat related question, how concerned do I need to be about spend for monitoring data stored in Azure?
So with anything cloud related, you're going to want to think about your costs, and you're going to want to plan very carefully. Something to think about. Just a quick couple of tips. If you're at your early stages of deploying Azure Monitor, when you set up your log analytics workspace, there's a thing that you can enable called a cap. Now, what this means is you can say, I want 10 gigabytes of data and no more for your testing period, which means you can hard limit the amount that you spend while you're testing. Where this gets tricky is you need to include each and every single metric or log that you want to collect. So, for example, if I'm collecting megabytes of memory used, and I'm collecting that every 10 seconds, and I have 500 VMs, that then becomes quite intensive. So then you need to start thinking about, in your planning stage, do I need this metric? Do I need it on this frequency? And do I need it from every single machine? Especially now with the new log analytics agent, there's a much more granular approach to collecting logs. So in the older model, you could only say, I want the application log, error warning, and information, yes or no. Now you can say, I want the error log, but specifically these event IDs by the use of something called XPath.
Okay, maybe 2 more questions, Warren. I think we can wrap this up. Want to use Azure Monitor as a single pane of glass. How do I get data from other cloud monitoring solutions into Azure Monitor?
So this does depend on the data that you want to get. So you can do custom ingestion into Azure Monitor, so you can use an API to do that. So that's one of your first options. You can also use, I want to say Arc here, but I'm not sure if Arc goes multi-cloud, and it's because I don't have all the information for Arc on hand right now, so just apologies for that. But 100% you can bring data in from other clouds. It can definitely be done. Just to give a very quick example, using the sister tool to Azure Monitor, which is Sentinel. Sentinel does great work in AWS. Even to the point where I saw an AWS engineer tweet out, I think it was 3 or 4 months ago, that the stuff they're getting out of Sentinel is better than what they're seeing on the AWS equivalent tool. So that's nice to see from an AWS engineer in that case. But yes, you can 100% bring in data from other clouds.
I guess, related to some of the questions around costing, is there any tooling available to help perhaps provide an estimate of the cost of Azure Monitor versus, say, using SCOM?
There is an Azure cost calculator. So this is for any Azure service, which is just something to bear in mind, because obviously with anything cloud related, if you think of it as a big dial that you turn, the more you turn the dial, the more expensive things get. So there is a thing called Azure cost calculator where you can go and you would say, I want to use something like log analytics. I have 1,000 virtual machines. I expect to bring in 1 gigabyte of data per machine, and then it'll give you an estimate cost. You can even go so far as to say, I expect to send 100 text messages and 500 ITSM integrations in a month, and it will give you the costing for all of that as well. Just to bear in mind, that is of course dependent on the region you are in, so make sure you specify the right region when you do the estimate, and of course it is only an estimate. The best way to get an accurate value is to of course do testing, and this is where the data cap comes in quite nicely, because you can hard limit yourself until you're happy with what's happening, and then just turn the tap and go nuts with it.
Okay, last question, Warren, and we can let you go. Are there any documents, checklists, best practices when migrating servers to Azure and incorporating the Azure monitoring into that new environment?
Yes, so there are quite a lot of documents around that. Our documentation team has been doing some fantastic work with documenting what's going on in Azure Monitor and best practices. So that is available on Microsoft Docs. With regards to moving servers to Azure, that's a little bit of a bigger topic, but there is something that we have called the well-architected framework, which covers the whole sort of approach to your cloud strategy and what you should be doing, and there is a monitoring section that's in that as well. There's also the cloud adoption framework, which includes a section for monitoring as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Warren. Obviously, a really hot topic, top of mind for a lot of people. and happy to have you on board and share your experience in the discussion around SCOM versus Azure Monitor. Up next, we have Cameron Fuller that's going to dive into some details on Azure Monitor.